All right, here we go with lesson one. We've done all of our introductory remarks in those previous videos, so we're just going to get right to it here. Homeowners insurance is a very good teaching tool. It tells us a lot about the insurance business, a lot about what's on this test, and from our knowledge of homeowners insurance, we can build anything on that because that's really the foundation of most of P&C, if you think about it. A homeowner policy is divided into coverage parts or coverage sections. Coverage A, coverage B, and coverage C is the name of those three sections. Nothing very creative about that. A similar situation to any policy, though. Car insurance, for example. Car insurance is organized into liability, comprehensive, collision, uninsured motorist, towing, rental, etc. Separate coverage parts, each giving you certain benefits under either their own terms and conditions of each part, and then they function as a whole to provide you with a program of insurance, but always individual coverage parts in play. And homeowners is no exception. Coverage A, coverage B, and coverage C. That's how the policy basic structure is set up. Coverage A refers to the house that you live in, which we call the dwelling, the roof and four walls that form the home that you live in, the dwelling. And we include a porch like this one. If you look at that house, it's pretty much a cube, and that's coverage A, the dwelling. But also coverage A is this porch that extends from the house. Even though it's not living space, strictly speaking, or air conditioned, it's every bit as much coverage A as the kitchen and the bedroom. So coverage A means the dwelling and decks, patios, and garages that extend from the house and are physically attached to the house and in fact form part of the house. Like this deck here, a little bit different construction style, but the same idea. Because it's attached to the house, then we would include the value of this deck in our calculation of coverage A because it's attached to and physically part of the dwelling. Coverage A is intended to give you enough money to rebuild your house from the slab up if it burns down in a fire or blows away in a tornado. Total and catastrophic loss down to the slab. If that happens, what would it cost to rebuild it? What would it take? Labor, materials, permitting, and design. How much would it actually take to rebuild a house all the way from the slab up? That's what coverage A is supposed to be geared toward, a total and catastrophic loss, and making sure that you could overcome such a total and catastrophic loss. So how do we do that? How do we figure out how much insurance is necessary? Coverage A. You're going to have a tool in your office called an estimated replacement cost tool, or words to that effect. And you're going to tell this computer tool where the house is, what zip code, because pricing is different from one zip code to another. Labor and materials vary in price from one region of the country to another. And so the zip code. And then you would simply tell the computer how big the house is. You tell it, okay, it's 7,000 square feet or it's 3,000 square feet, whatever. The square footage of a house is nobody's opinion, and it's nothing to argue about. The square footage is what the square footage is. And you simply tell the computer what the square footage is, and then it will ask you, well, is it just a box house, or is it L-shaped, or is it fancy with extensions coming out all over the place at different angles, and how involved and how complex is the construction? And then it will ask you, well, what's on the outside? Is it brick or siding or stucco or what? And then inside, is everything really fancy Italian marble and upgraded, hardwoods and exotics, or is it all just builder's grade regular stuff? And what the computer is trying to do with all this input is figure out a per square foot price to rebuild that house if it all burned down, considering whether it's wallpaper on the walls or just paint. Is it hardwood floor or just carpet? And with all of those inputs, the computer can figure out a per square foot price to rebuild that house. And so if it's a super fancy mansion and everything in there is upgraded and crazy, it could come to $500 per square foot. And if it's a 7,000 square foot house times 500 per foot, then the replacement cost of that house is $3.5 million. That's the replacement cost. And that's the number that we are concerned with in the insurance business, the replacement cost. This could be a $10 million property, couldn't it? I mean, if it's on 2 acres in a golf course community, it's easily a $10 million property, but we don't insure it for its real estate value. We insure it for its replacement cost, labor and materials, permitting and design to rebuild it. On the other way, this could be somebody where you have a client who just got that property for $2 million in a short sale or a bankruptcy or whatever, and it just stole it. The sellers were just giving it away, and your customer just bought it for 2 million and thinks you're going to come in here and insure it for 2 million. And you're like, yeah, no, it doesn't work that way. You don't insure it based on purchase price. Don't insure it based on appraisal value either, from what the county tax appraiser says about the house. So we don't ask the question what a house is worth, because that doesn't really go anywhere. What we want to know is the replacement cost of the house. And that is the square footage times an appropriate value per square foot to rebuild that level of construction. And it's the same thing from a mansion to just a regular house in a subdivision to a hunting shed out in the woods. Square footage times the appropriate value per square foot for that level of construction. Now, coverage A includes garages, decks, and patios that are built in or attached to the garage. So this fully integrated garage is all coverage A space. You have a built-in, fully integrated garage with living space above, and we don't make a distinction between this 2.5 car garage and the upstairs living area. It's all coverage A. Some other types of garages, you have a connected garage. We have one wall in common with the house, and it just goes out as an extension, no living space above, but this garage is connected to the house, and it's coverage A, just like the rest of the house is. This is an attached garage. It's attached by way of a breezeway. There is no common wall, strictly speaking, but it's an attached garage with no living space above. But this garage is coverage A, just like this house is. And this garage is coverage A, just like this house. And this garage is coverage A, just like this house. All right. So garages, decks, and patios extending from the house and forming part of the house are coverage A. And now we turn our attention to coverage B. Coverage B provides insurance for all of the other structures on the premises that are not the dwelling and not in contact with the dwelling and don't form part of the dwelling. A structure. The definition of a structure. A structure is a building or other useful thing that is constructed so as to form a part of the realty, meaning it's attached to the ground on a slab. A structure is immovable and is not considered to be personal property, but rather real property. A structure is a permanent part of the residence premises. And remember, right here, a structure can be a building or an other useful thing, not a building, but permanently attached to the real estate. And here we have examples of both. This garage, this detached garage, is a classic example of a coverage B element. It's a structure because it's permanent, and it's a building because it has roof and 4 walls. This poured concrete driveway is a structure. It's a separate, useful thing that has been constructed so as to form a part of the realty. It's not a building, but it's every bit as much of a structure as the garage or the house, for that matter. Structures are permanent, and they may be buildings and they may not. Okay, a structure. So if a tree falls and wipes out this garage, you have a coverage B claim. And if a tree falls and cracks this driveway into 9 pieces, we have a coverage B claim. Coverage B provides insurance for other structures on the premises that are not part of the dwelling and don't form a connection with the dwelling. And some structures can be buildings and some are not buildings. And we'll see some other examples of some non-building coverage B structures. Coverage B by default on the policy is 10% of coverage A. So if we calculate square footage times the price, that a house coverage A is 250,000, the replacement cost is 250,000. Then by default and automatically, all of the coverage B will be subject to a limit of $25,000. 10% of coverage A is the default budget for all coverage B, garage and that slab and a lot of other things have to be covered under the coverage B policy limit. And the coverage B policy limit by default is 10% of coverage A. So if coverage A is 250,000, coverage B by default is 25,000. Some other coverage B elements, structures. This in-ground swimming pool is a structure. It's not a building, but it's a coverage B structure. And so is the deck around the pool and the fence around the deck around the pool and the gazebo and this fencing that you can see back here in the distance. All of those are coverage B structures. They're on the premises, not the dwelling and not forming part of the dwelling, but they're all coverage B. This coverage B summer kitchen is a building and a structure. It's a structure because it's permanent, and it's a building because it has roof and 4 walls. All of the fencing that goes around the property, that's coverage B. Fences are structures because they're permanent and they're set in concrete, but they're not buildings because they're not buildings, but it's all coverage B. And all of these elements on the property have to be insured under the coverage B limit of insurance, and it has to be enough when a claim happens and an adjuster rolls up there. And we'll show you some more and develop these ideas here as we go along. So coverage A is the dwelling, and coverage B is other structures, with the most common being garages and fences. But I want to make sure we come away understanding that a garage can be coverage A or a garage can be coverage B. So don't think that a garage is just always one or the other, because a garage can be coverage A if it's connected to the house or attached to the house, and it can be coverage B if it's a separate structure out there all by itself. And if it's coverage A, then all the coverage A rules and limits apply. But if it's a coverage B garage, then all of the coverage B rules and limits apply naturally. And so on test day, here's a couple of very important things to be able to do. They're never going to tell you the amount of coverage B. Figuring out the amount of coverage B is, in fact, one of the most common test questions. So they will tell you that a house is insured for coverage A at $250,000. And that automatically needs to tell you, I mean, immediately when you see that, you have to know that coverage B is $25,000. That's the whole point of telling you that coverage A is $250,000, so that you can immediately, hopefully, recognize that coverage B by default now is $25,000. That's all you have to work with for all damage to coverage B. And now look what happens. We'll take it to the next step here in the test question. A storm comes along and damages a detached garage, with the key word in there, detached. Right away, you have to recognize that, this is coverage B, because it's a detached garage. And if it's a detached garage and it's coverage B, and if coverage A is 250, then all we have to work with here is 25,000 for all claims associated with coverage B in this garage. And now look what happened. A storm came along, damages this detached garage, and the repair estimates come around to $40,000. Well, how much can we pay? Answer, the most we can pay is the coverage B limit of 25, because that's all there is to work with for coverage B. And this had an uninsured loss here, and it's too bad, and there's nothing that can be done for it. Coverage B is 10% of coverage A by default, and it can be raised, as we'll see, but the default is 10% of coverage A. And so in this example, where coverage B had never been raised, you could have an uninsured loss because we will not cover a $40,000 loss when all we have to go around is $25,000 worth of insurance. And all of that just had to be automatic. Coverage A, well, that tells me how much coverage B is. The word detached garage, that told me we're talking about a coverage B question. And now I have to apply the coverage B rules, which we'll see later in the course, and the coverage B limit, which is what we're talking about here in this example. And you can't miss a single word or you'll get the question wrong. Here's the exact same idea. The only thing we've changed here is that it's an attached garage. Not a detached garage, but an attached garage, meaning now it's a coverage A garage. And the coverage B rules and limits don't apply because it's a coverage A garage, not a coverage B garage. And that's the whole point of that question. So now when a storm comes along and does $40,000 worth of damage to this garage or this garage, it's all good because the coverage A limit and the coverage A rules apply. And we've got $250,000 to work with, and that's more than enough to cover a $40,000 claim to one of these garages. Damage to a coverage A garage would not be subject to the 10% coverage B limit or any of the coverage B rules. So it makes all the difference in the world. And I wanted to do this early in the lesson and early in the course to show you how carefully you have to read these questions. Because if you just miss one word, then the question can make no sense when there it was, the key word attached versus detached. And if you didn't recognize it, then it's a very long day trying to get through the test if you're going to overlook key words in the questions. Can't do that. Okay, coverage A, the dwelling. Coverage B, other structures on the premises not in contact with the dwelling and not forming part of the dwelling. And now we move to coverage C. Coverage C means all of your stuff, personal property, your things, real property, part of the real estate, and then personal property is the opposite or the complement of real property, your personal belongings, all of your stuff. Now, your stuff, your contents, your coverage C can sometimes be on premises. Here it's in the living room, but sometimes we pack up and go who knows where, and now we have contents off premises. So contents can do that. It can be on premises or off premises. Coverage A and B, not really, because they don't go anywhere. There's no such thing, right? It's permanent part of the real estate. The whole point is they don't go anywhere. But coverage C can certainly go somewhere. And so we have to reckon with coverage C in terms of being on premises or off premises. And so this distinction, real property, part of the real estate, and that means it's going to be coverage A or coverage B. And then personal property, all of your stuff. Coverage C contents, sometimes it's on premises. Now, all of the contents here is on premises and in the house, but on premises doesn't mean just in the house. This contents, this patio set outside in the backyard is on premises just as much as anything here in the living room is on premises. So on premises does not mean limited to in the house. But then when you go off premises and go who knows where, now that's a different situation. So on premises, whether it be in the house or outside on the grounds, and then off premises is the distinction that we're raising. So is it coverage A or coverage B or coverage C? That's some of the distinctions that we have to draw sometimes. Now, here is an above ground pool, and it's attached to a slab, and it's not going anywhere, and it's coverage B because it's attached and therefore making it a structure. But look at this pool. This is an above ground pool, and it's just sitting there on the grass. You just roll that thing out, you stand it up, you put the liner in, hope you don't rip it, and it's nothing permanent about that. Even though it's big and heavy, it's still coverage C contents. It's personal property because it's not a permanent feature of the real estate, because it's not on a slab and hasn't been made permanent in any way. take this example to another level. Look at this mini building, this little mini shed, mini barn, right? You could have that delivered from Lowe's or Home Depot any day of the week. And it sure looks like a building, and it sure looks like it ought to be coverage B, a building structure. But wait, is it on a slab or not? A structure is permanently attached to the real estate. If you have that thing delivered and you just roll it out and you put it here on some gravel and there it sits, it's coverage C contents, because it's not coverage A because it's not the house. And it's not coverage B either because it's not a structure, unless you make it a permanent feature of the real estate by attaching it and bolting it to a slab and making it permanent. So even though it looks like a coverage B mini building, you got to come down here and see if it's on a slab or not, because that's the difference. Coverage A and B are permanent features of the real estate, and all coverage C is personal property, not permanent feature of the real estate. So you have to look carefully and closely. Okay, further to our contents discussion. Coverage C contents, all of your stuff, your personal property. Where's my stuff covered? Now that you mention it, yeah, I get that. Personal property can be on premises or off premises or who knows where. And so what's the deal? Well, good policies say doesn't make any difference where it is. We cover all of your personal property anywhere in the world. Literally, the policy says anywhere in the world. And that's a mic drop. And what are you supposed to say after that? That's it. Anywhere in the world. Okay, got it. Anywhere in the world, right. All of your stuff anywhere in the world. But some not so good policies, different story. Not so good policy might say, we only cover personal property that is usual to the occupancy as a dwelling. Meaning just the stuff that you use in the house in connection with occupying the house as a dwelling. Household goods and furniture and electronics and clothing and all of the things that you use to occupy and enjoy the home are covered, but not things like a bowling ball, a bicycle, a camping tent, bow and arrow, things that you use outside the home, not in connection with occupying and enjoying the home as a residence, as a dwelling. So nowhere near as broad a coverage when it's limited to just household goods. And some of these policies will also go on to say, we only cover your personal property while it's on the described location. No off-premises coverage or very little off-premises coverage versus anywhere in the world. So very different insuring agreements are in play. And some policies say all of your stuff anywhere in the world. Some policies say not all your stuff, only household goods and only on premises. Now, there's one distinction that we do make in all policies, good and bad. Personal property is what we're trying to cover here, not business-related property. Your personal stuff that you roll with is covered, but not business related. Tools, manuals, gauges, equipment, uniforms, supplies, samples, all of this stuff that you use in your business to produce an income. Hey, that's commercial. And your homeowners doesn't really want to hear about it. We have some limited coverage for business related property, but generally speaking, we're not a fan, and we're going to refer you to go and buy some commercial insurance if it comes to that. All right, so wrapping this up. Coverage A, B, and C each have a specific hard cap of coverage on the policy, and you have only that much and no more. Coverage A, coverage B, and coverage C. Coverage A is supposed to be enough insurance to rebuild the house from the slab up, the replacement cost of the dwelling. Now, by default, coverage B will be 10% of that amount, but it can be raised by you as an agent, and it better be raised. You better quote a customer an upgraded amount if the default 10% is not amount. Look at this backyard. This pool alone is a $50,000 pool, right? You got the deck and the hot tub, and they've got a barbecue out there and all this fencing that goes all around the place and decks and patios. And this place has a ton of coverage B, and you just can't leave it sit there at the default 10% amount Because when storms happen and trees start flying and everything starts to get busted, then these people could be in really bad shape if they didn't have a good agent to look out for them. Coverage C now, there really is no hard and fast rule about coverage C. Coverage B, absolute rule, 10% of coverage A by default shall be the coverage B limit, but we don't have that over in coverage C. Usually a company will set coverage C equal to 50 or 75% of coverage A. And again, it can be lowered or raised or whatever. Let's see these in action. It's going to jump here to the next slide here, which is a copy of the declarations page that we study in a little bit closer in Unit 4. A declaration page shows how much insurance you have. Coverage A, the dwelling, $345,000. Coverage B, other structures. And notice it's the default 10% value. I sure hope these people don't have $80,000 worth of coverage B out there in their backyard, because if a storm comes and trashes it all and an adjuster rolls up with this deck page on the claim jacket, wait, $80,000 worth of damage out in the backyard, but only $34,000 of coverage B to go around. This is not going to end well. And there's coverage C, your personal property, $241,000. So pretty big number, right? 75% of coverage A. And you get all of it, all of coverage A, plus all of coverage B, and all of coverage C, plus, plus, plus. So in every case, it's plus, plus, plus. All right. So that's it. We're off to a good start. And then just, word for the wise, outside of test day, when you're doing this for a living, you have to know what's in this backyard and offer a customer an additional amount of coverage B if necessary. You can't just leave everything at the default value. All right. So we'll leave it there for the end of lesson 1.